Game place. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another Career Foundry event this evening. I know that a lot of people are joining. Drop us some emojis because we've got an emoji bar at the bottom. Also, we've got a chat on the right-hand side. So whilst people are joining, just drop your name and why you're interested in data analytics. We want this to be as interactive as possible. Alex wants it to be as interactive as possible. Oh, I see the emojis coming in already. Great job. So don't be shy. Yeah, just drop your name in the public chat. And if you're watching on YouTube or LinkedIn, because we're streaming there too, also drop your name there too. This evening, it's all about the top 5 emerging trends in data in 2024. We are recording this session, so if anyone misses it or wants to see a recording, we'll be sending a recording around tomorrow via email for those watching on Big Marker. But before we kick off, let me just introduce myself and Career Foundry. I'm William, Events and Communications Lead here at Career Foundry, and Career Foundry is the online school for your career change into tech. So we guide you from complete beginner to job-ready professional in data analytics and help you land that dream job. With Career Foundry programs, you get a mentor and a tutor. So that's our dual mentorship model. And we also have a job guarantee. So if you don't land a job within 180 days of graduation, we give you a full refund. If you've got any questions about the curriculum or the program, I would say book a call with one of our program advisors. If you're on YouTube, we've got a program advisor link in the description below. This evening, it's all going to be about trends, but if you want to ask anything specific about maybe the curriculum or the job guarantee, I would recommend booking a call with a program advisor. I think that's about it from me, Alex. I think I'm just gonna I'm gonna give the floor to you. One thing I would say is that we are having a live Q&A at the end, and I'm sure we're gonna have lots and lots of questions about emerging trends. So drop all of those questions in the public chat. Alex is probably gonna pick up on some of those as we go through, but I'm gonna disappear into the background. I'm gonna come back at the end, and then we're gonna have a live Q&A. So if you've got any questions about data analytics, now is the time. And Alex is the person because he has a fantastic YouTube channel, Alex the Analyst, over on YouTube, which is closing in on 700,000 subscribers. So anyone from the Career Foundry audience this evening, check out Alex's channel and like and subscribe and help Alex get to 700,000. On that note, Alex, I'm going to disappear. I'll be back at the end. And yeah, everybody enjoy. And yeah, see you later.
Awesome. Thanks for the intro. This topic I'm really excited about because 2024 is every year just wild things happen in the data world, and so 2024 is no different. I think 2024 specifically has already been just wild in the past month. And so yeah, kind of forecasting out for the rest of the year, I'm excited to talk about it, kind of give you my thoughts. I think I have a pretty good perspective on this. My job, which now I own, I run a consulting company in data analytics. I work with a ton of startups. So I got a really good pulse and really good beat on kind of the startup world with a lot of data infrastructure companies, data migration companies, data analytics companies that I do consulting for. But then I have my YouTube channel and, I'm on LinkedIn and Twitter. And so I get a lot of messages of people with new technologies that are coming out and questions, and they're sending me articles, and I keep up with the stuff a little too much. I probably should be doing other things sometimes, but I just get really into it. So I feel like I have a pretty good idea, a pretty good sense of what's kind of coming and some of the big trends that are going to be coming in 2024. If you do not know who I am, my name is Alex Freeberg. I am the founder of Analyst Builder for technical interviews and of my consulting company called Alex Analytics, and then my YouTube channel. And so I do a lot of stuff. And if you haven't seen my YouTube channel, go check it out. It's pretty cool. Let's start off with, I specifically ordered these in a very intentional way. So this was not random. I want to get the big one out of the way, because this one is something that I'm sure every single person out there is thinking about, talking about, always trying to keep up with. But AI specifically, there are some things that I think are going to be bigger than others. For example, I think everybody knows about like AI encoding and AI doing like summarization of text. So I think that is something that basically almost everybody's aware of at this point, especially if you're in the data world. Like coding, there's lots of different AI tools. like GitHub Copilot, ChatGPT, there's, Bard and Anthropic and all these other different AI tools that you can use for coding. Some that are integrated, some that are standalone products. So I'm not going to go super into that. Well, let's talk about a little bit about AI and kind of the changes that we're going to be seeing from 2023. 2023 was a wild ride. It was like a roller coaster with AI. When it first started kind of emerging in late 2022, there was a lot of, I don't want to say hyping it up a little too much. But even into 2023, we saw a lot of hype around AI and everything that it could potentially do. There were a lot of fears around it, a lot of concerns about job layoffs because of that. And now we're into 2024, and I think people have a much better sense of what AI can do, right? It isn't going to replace software developers or programmers or data analysts, anytime soon, but it is a fantastic tool. And now we're seeing AI can do a lot of different things. And what's amazing with AI is that now large companies are really starting to build out their infrastructure and build out everything they need to start using AI much better. For example, I attended a conference last year near mid-year, end of year, and this Fortune 500 company was talking about how they're going to be using AI across their entire enterprise. And that was the first time that I had seen it. But then after I started, keeping up with some of these other companies, they also were talking about something called synthetic generated data, which is the third point on the thing down there. So I'm going to talk about that for a second. They mentioned something called synthetically generated data. And at first I was like, okay, what is this? How does this work? Because I've never heard of it before. And essentially what it is data that you can generate based off of different use cases and different scenarios. For example, you have stock data, which most people are aware of is kind of something that a lot of people use in like projects and different stuff, or maybe it's cryptocurrency, data. And so what you can do is you can plug in different what if scenarios. What if, we have a Republican president nominated in 2024 versus a Democratic president? And it kind of forecasts based off of historical trends with that data. And it does these what if scenarios. So it forecasts and can create data for that scenario versus this scenario. And so it's pretty incredible. And you can essentially get it to do almost whatever you want. Now, is the data perfect? No. But it is a really, really amazing tool to test out these different hypotheses and these different scenarios that could happen. This is a really useful tool. I know I worked in the medical field in healthcare for a long time, working with cancer data, hematology data, claims data, really, just for some context there, I worked with a lot of clinical trials. And so with clinical trials, you have to get a lot of data. You have to collect a ton of data to make sure that your outcomes are good for certain drugs before you put them on the market. Well, with synthetically generated data, you might be able to help generate certain pieces of that without having to necessarily collect every single piece, which may take months extra. And so there are a ton of really, really good use cases where you're using AI to add data or create this data for you. So really, really neat. So if you haven't heard about that, highly recommend looking into it. It really was pretty amazing when I first heard about it. Now I've seen lots of other companies start to do that as well. So I think 2024, if you haven't already seen it, you'll see it more, especially in like financial institutions. I think finance and healthcare are two where this specifically is going to be a really, really, just great thing that AI can do. The one up top is hyper personalization. Now, if you don't know what like personalization is for products, think ads, right? You go on the internet, you get a completely new laptop, you don't log into anything. You create like a new LinkedIn account or Instagram account or whatever it is, and you start going on places and start going on websites, and they start collecting that data and tracking that data. And they, on most of these websites, are going to offer something like a personalized advertisement, right? You start looking at boats online, and all of a sudden you're seeing boats in different things. we've already started to see these this personalization for the past several years, right? This is nothing new, especially with the invent of social media and the rise of social media. There's so much data to be collected. Well, hyper personalization goes a little bit beyond that. It goes a little bit beyond just collecting a little bit of data to where it's using your interests and it's using the knowledge that the data that they have on you to actually create a unique advertisement just for you. Now, this is just one example. Hyper personalization goes beyond that. But for this example, for advertisements, you're going to start seeing that are unique to you, something that no one else in the world is going to get the same advertisement as you. I've already seen examples of this, and I'm sure maybe you have as well on social media where, I go on there, I'm Alex Freeberg, and so I go onto the internet and I'm typing around and it says, hey, Alex, you live in Charleston, South Carolina, here's a coupon for 20% to this restaurant that you love or that you went to that one time. It's kind of freaky. But it's like super personalized and it's hard to kind of look away because you're like, this is so in tune with who you are because they have so much data on you. Now, imagine this for not just advertisements, but imagine this for a lot of different things. Well, we've already seen a little bit of this. If you think video games, if you think social media, and things like your iPhone, hyper personalization is going to be very, very, very big, especially probably in 2025, but we'll see a lot of it this year. Apple is working on a lot of these things. And so, do a little bit of Google search on the hyper personalization that Apple is doing. It's really fascinating. It's a little bit scary, if I'm being honest, because I see this like 10 years down the road. I'm like, what's going to be happening this year will be, what kids are growing up, in 10 years, that's going to be normal to them. It's just weird to think about. And then the next thing is integration into everyday tools and products. Now, this one I kind of mentioned a little earlier. For coding, just for one example, is AI is getting integrated into almost all coding tools because everybody wants it. For example, for my company, Analyst Builder, we use Supabase for a lot of our data. Well, Supabase has an AI tool built in for questions, and I'll say, okay, let's think about a certain population. What are the people who are paying versus not paying? What are the percentages? And I can it'll help me generate a query. Does it always get it right? Not always. If anyone from Supabase is out there listening, it's definitely not perfect. I've used it quite a bit, and it's not perfect, but it is really good, right? It helps you get like 80% of the way, and you can kind of fix it. Well, this is not just going to be for coding tools. You'll see this in almost everything. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with Google plugins. Google plugins are everywhere, and AI is in a lot of them. And I've used a lot of them myself because I'm really interested in that for productivity. And I do a lot of summarizing information because I don't have time to read 20 pages of a PDF. And so we have AI that's being integrated into websites. You have it that is being integrated into like PDFs and different tools. And so this is the year that you're going to see just AI everywhere, right? And you can choose to not use it. You can choose to just do it the old-fashioned way. And I say old-fashioned, I just mean like how you do it now. AI is meant to be an enabler, and it's going to be in almost everything. You're already seeing it on like a flight, what's it called? Like Expedia.com, right? You go onto Expedia, you go onto a car website. They have AI. They're trying it out. They're testing it out. And now that's in 2023. In 2024, it's going to get a lot better. There'll be a lot of products that are created specifically for car dealerships, specifically for airline websites, specifically for all these things. So you're getting the AI that's personalized, if you want to go back to the previous one, specifically for each of these use cases. And that's just it's a really, really interesting time that we're going to be living in 2024 to experience all this. Because I guarantee you, because I have 3 kids, in 5-10 years, that's going to be normal for them. All of these tools that we're building and that are being developed and starting to be integrated into everyday products, I'm going to tell them about the time that I lived before AI. Before AI was in everything, here's what it was like. And they're just going to be like, oh, Dad, you're so old. Let's go on to the next one. This one is one that I've been saying for probably about over a year now. And when I first started talking about it, I actually got a lot of pushback because most people have a tough time believing or a tough time seeing themselves as entrepreneurs or as individual workers. Give me one sec. I talked to a lot of people, and a lot of people were like, I could never do that. I could never be a freelancer. I could never be a consultant because that my brain just doesn't work that way. And I need to work at a company where I just have a W-2, and that's what I do. I started saying that maybe like the end of 2022, beginning of 2023. And again, I got a lot of pushback, but now I've seen a big a big shift in opinion on this. And I think it's becoming a lot more mainstream. And people are like, okay, freelancing is like, it's going to be pretty big. And I myself, I feel like I had a pretty good pulse on that just because I started doing consulting myself about 3 years ago. And I was like, there's going to be a big market for this, an even bigger market than there already was, in a year or two, which is where we are now. Now, what's contributing to this? There's a few different things. One is cost of living. The next is Gen X, and then the third is lifestyle. Now, why do I say these three? Cost of living is increasing. People don't want to, and I say people, I'm not talking about every single person in the world. I'm just talking about more people are starting to more lean this way because of these factors. But cost of living is going up. There's no doubt about it. Inflation really hit us all. My everything bill for my whole life went up like 20% in the past like 2 years. Not good. So cost of living is really getting to everybody. And because of that, people are looking for extra ways to make money apart from their full-time job. And so freelancing is definitely one of those ways. If you have a skill that you can freelance and put out there and be like, hey, I'm really good at Tableau. I'm really good at cloud platforms. I can really program well in R, do this or that. You can put that skill online and you can freelance for that skill. Consulting is a little bit different. I see freelancing and consulting. A lot of people will put those two together as like they're the same thing. They can be in some instances, but consulting is more like you have a lot of experience and you're in there to advise, not typically do hands-on work, not writing the code, building the infrastructure, building the visualizations, whatever it is. Typically, that's more of like a freelancer. I usually delineate those two by saying freelancers are more hands-on writing, as if you're like hiring an employee. Consultants are more like high-level advising and bringing insights into a company. So the other piece of this was the startups. So I've talked a little bit about freelancing and consulting, but startups are popping up everywhere. I don't know if you've noticed, but more and more and more people are starting YouTube channels, TikTok channels, Instagram channels. That is the example because I think that's the most visible thing that people see. They're on social media. They see all these new people coming up and starting their own thing and trying to start their like own little business. Well, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's what's visible. But all these people on the back end are also, a lot of these people are building products as well. They're starting companies to solve certain problems. And the reason for that, something that's driving that is there has been quite a few layoffs in 2023. And now we just saw another wave of that in beginning of 2024. Now, is that across all of the job market? No. But for some specific big tech companies, that's kind of what people look at and they see that. And so all these really smart people who were in these jobs are getting laid off. They're like, I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to working at Amazon again, where I'm just going to get laid off in 6 months or a year because the market is like just really wild. And so they're like, what can I do to not have that happen again? I'm going to go start my own startup. I want to solve this problem that I was working on in my previous company. And I want to, market that and make that a product so that I don't have to work again. Right? I can just automate it or something. The next piece of the contributing factor is Gen X and lifestyle. Now, I myself am a Gen Z. My wife likes to laugh at because I'm right on the cusp. Right, I'm like right like 2 months before being a millennial, and my wife is a millennial, and so the generations are just a little bit different. I think the older generations are more like, company man, be a union man, and they want to like be with a company for 30 years. Well, Gen X is not that way. I've already worked with a lot of people in Gen X, and they like to do their own thing. They are very independent. They don't really, not everyone. I'm being very general, not everybody, but a lot of people. They're, the way that the younger generation is going is they want to be more free. They want more freedom to move and travel and do these different things instead of being locked into a location. And these startups and freelancing and consulting jobs allow you to do that at any age. I'm just saying Gen X is definitely more leaning that way. If you look at just trends, the older generations tend to stick with the companies, while the younger tends to be more like, I want to do my own thing. Lifestyle is definitely changing as well. Just to touch on this for a second on myself, I used to work in for a Fortune 500 company. I was in person, and I got to meet a lot of really cool people, make great network. It was really great. I liked it. Good perks, good benefits. But I didn't get to spend as much time with my family as I wanted. And I have 3 kids now. And when I was doing that, my kids are very young. And so they were in, daycare because my wife was working at the same time as I was. And so we didn't get to see our kids that much. Not exactly the best lifestyle in the world if you really love your children. And I really love my children. I wanted to be around them more. And so I started consulting on the side. And eventually that became my full-time job. And so now I get to spend probably 40, 50% more time with my kids because I'm there in the morning to help them get ready. I'm there in the afternoon when they come home at 3 o'clock instead of like getting home at 5:30 like I used to do. And it's awesome. It's really great. It's very freeing. The next point on here is companies need to build data teams, but don't want to invest in an entire team right away. This one actually, I will say, kind of overlaps a little bit with the AI one. AI is something that a lot of companies, even if they're like not even like a huge data company, they do things more like the traditional way back in the day of intuition and just knowing the market. Well, they're seeing like, hey, our competitors are using AI and people like it and people are enjoying it. This new feature that they added, and we need to do that too. We need to not fall behind in the times and be, 80 years old, saying this is how we do it. We're not changing our ways. We need to be adaptable. And so I've already worked with a lot of companies. Probably last year, I worked with maybe 7 or 8 companies that were not originally, didn't already have huge data teams built out. That just wasn't their core of their business. And it was more about sales and the product. That's what they were building. But the data wasn't like a huge factor for them. And so I've noticed that these companies are like, well, we have to. We don't really have a choice. We need to. But a lot of these startups especially don't have a budget for it. And so who are they going to hire if they don't have a budget to hire on, 3 full-time people to build this out and start making it usable and have a business impact? We're going to do freelancers or consultants. And a lot of freelancers who are really good at this stuff can do a lot of it on their own. And they're going to be a little bit more expensive, right? Because freelancers and consultants typically charge a little bit more. But that one person can do a lot of this work and they don't have to pay for health benefits or insurance or all these other things. And so they don't have to commit as heavy into hiring people on full time. They can just hire these freelancers or consultants. And so I think you'll see, and before I go on to the next one, I think you'll see, as my last point here, you're going to see a lot more people going into freelancing and consulting. Now, one note is it's hard to get into freelancing and consulting if you have no experience. It just is, it's a fact. Typically the people who hire consultants and freelancers, they're hiring them to solve a problem, not to train them, right? Because they're not bringing them on as a full-time employee. They are hiring them for a specific reason for them to solve a problem. So you usually need experience for that, just as a side note. This one has been really, really, really interesting to me because I've had some really close hands-on experience with this just last year. I was working with a company, and at one of my previous roles, the Fortune 500 company, I was working on data migration, getting everything into the cloud because everything was all spread out. We had all these data silos, so I was working on data migration and choosing a data cloud platform and contracts and all these different things. And so I have really good experience with that. And so, this company was like, hey, Alex, we want to know, should our company move everything into the cloud, or is there a different direction? And so I started talking, and there may have been someone who's better at this than me out there, but I think it was some of the most interesting conversations that I've had around this, and I was very helpful. But here's the point. When we started really getting down to it, I said, what's your main, what is your goal with this? They said, we want all of our data in one place. And I was like, totally get it. Absolutely understand. And then they said, security is like our number one thing. We've had, we've just heard horror stories of data security and all these different things. So I started asking more and more and more questions. And by the end of it, I was like, I'm a big believer in the cloud. I'm a big believer, and as are a ton of other companies. I was like, but for your use case, I don't know if I'd recommend the cloud for you guys, because we looked at their budget, we looked at their trends for, or their projected revenue. I was like, I think I would just bite the bullet and do everything on-prem, because it wasn't a huge company. And I was like, you're going to have exorbitant fees for to build out your infrastructure and then also maintain it. And we were looking at like AWS. I was like, that's going to be a lot of money, a lot of money. And I was like, for what you guys are doing, I don't think that's what you need. I was like, if this was my business and I'm trying to help you run this as if it was my business too, I was like, I would just bite the bullet, pay the upfront cost of building an on-prem server or servers for them. And that will by far be an incredible investment, have better security, less downtime, less dependency on a cloud platform. And some of these things that I have right here are the exact reasons why I recommended that for them. So let's talk a little bit about why it's called the Great Cloud Divide. Right now, there has been a huge uptick over the past 10 years with cloud platforms, just massive. Multi-billion dollar revenue streams for all these cloud platforms, specifically the ones that most people know is Google Cloud Platform, AWS, and Azure. Just massive, right? And there's a lot of reasons why people want to go to the cloud. It's easy. It is genuinely pretty easy to get up and to use these platforms in general. You get to put all of your data in one place, maybe even easier than doing something like an on-prem server. And I would say that when you're kind of spread out, when you're a larger global company, it's easier to connect to all these different places and give access to the data, which is very important. Now, the downside of cloud platforms is there is a massive amount of cost associated with cloud platforms, and it's only going to go up. It's only going to get more expensive. There is no possibility in my mind that we will see a decrease in prices for cloud platforms in the next 5 years. It's just is never going to happen. And so these cloud platforms, they typically will have a lot of incentives for you to get into their ecosystem. But then once you get in, you are going to have a ton of fees and costs associated with that. So just to give you an example, if you've never seen like these memes before, it's usually a guy who's like, opening an envelope and he looks at it. It's like, this is my AWS bill, and his eyes get huge and he's shocked and he's like this is insane. It's because AWS is not like, just as an example, AWS is typically you have something like an autoscaler where you're scaling certain features and you can't always control what you're going to pay, right? And so for a lot of these companies, they turn on these autoscalers and like, hey, if it costs $500, no problem. It's $500, $500. Then 1 month something changes, whether AWS tells you or not, or your where you're ingesting the data or whatever changes. And then the next bill is like $3,000 or $6,000 or $10,000. I've heard instances where a bill normally was $10,000 went up to $100,000. That is very, very scary. And so, yes, usually they have incentives to get you into their ecosystem, but the long-term operational costs for these cloud platforms are very high, which is okay if you're like a Fortune 500 company, a big company. There are good plans even for small startups. A lot of startups use AWS and Azure and all these different cloud platforms. But long term, it always goes up. It always goes up. So because of this, because of that piece of it, there is this growing movement towards more on-prem servers for people's data. And on-prem servers are just, they're servers, right? So like in the cloud, they have all these server farms where it's literally tens of thousands of servers running at the same time. And when you use their services, they allocate you a specific server that you're just kind of like borrowing. You're just like renting out a server essentially. With buying a server, it's like taking one of those servers or multiple of those servers and you're putting it on-prem, which means on premises. You're buying a physical server that you get to control. And it's a little bit more upfront cost. Typically, you'll need someone who can work it and run it. So that typically is could be a single person or an IT team who actually runs and maintains the server, make sure everything's good in the databases and with the data ingestion and the server's running well. And it's a more upfront cost, 100%. But if you kind of look further ahead, a lot of these companies are looking further ahead and they're like, our AWS bill is going to be $75,000 per month if we continue down this road. But if we spend $250,000 now, it's going to only cost us like $10,000 a month for the next 10 years. Or, that's like a rough example. But I've had those exact conversations with many companies, and it is this growing movement of, yes, the cloud is still growing, but you're now seeing a lot of people just bite the bullet and be like, we can't afford our AWS bill for the next 5 years. Like, it's just not feasible. So that is definitely a big reason, is just cost. The next things are internet dependency and downtime. For cloud platforms, you're dependent on their services. If their services are down, even for 10 minutes, sometimes certain companies cannot operate effectively for their product or their customers with any downtime. Now, downtime can happen with your servers that you buy on-prem, right? But most likely you're going to be in control of when that gets back up. You have somebody on call or you have somebody in the office who can fix that quickly. You are not in control when it is in the cloud. You are fully dependent on them. And that is a problem for a lot of businesses. They cannot afford to have that. And they've been dependent on it. And they're like, we can't do that anymore. Some companies aren't. Like my company, we're not. We are reliant on AWS being up. But if it goes up or if it goes down, it's, we have backup redundancies in place. And so these are all things that you need to be thinking about with these two different options. The last one is data security. Most people would agree, and I would say most, I'm going to say all, that on-prem servers are going to be more secure than cloud platforms. Your data isn't sitting on some server where someone else can go access it. Your data is with you on-prem, controlled by some type of database administrator or something like that. Much, much, much more secure, typically in general. And so the cloud is going to grow, but we're seeing a larger move towards on-prem. The next one is the year of documentation and governance. I don't know why I named it that. I just thought it'd be fun. This one relates a lot to AI as well. All these, there's a little AI in everything these days. 2024, what can you do? People are realizing, and I remember back when I first started about 7 years ago, documentation wasn't like that super important, especially at like some of the smaller companies I first started working for. I was working at a nonprofit and then a healthcare analytics company. When I first started out, documentation wasn't like super important. But with the rise of AI, teams are like, wait a second. Our data is important. Yeah, we realize that. But now AI can do more than just work with our data. AI can have context and it can have processes and procedures. And if we actually wrote that out and had some guidelines and we could put that into AI, it would just help with it understanding our data even more. And so I know multiple companies that are, just off the top of my head, Canva and Figma are two really big tech companies. Both of them came out with, I don't know what the word is. not newsletters, just like announcements being like, we're doubling down on documentation and governance for those specific reasons. Hey, we're introducing all these new features and these new things, but we need to get our ducks in a row for it to be really effective and useful. And that's just two examples. There's a ton of other examples. And so what I wrote here was that governments and companies are cracking down on their data governance and compliance because historically it just hasn't been crazy important. And it is shocking if you really think about it, because just with the documentation piece, what used to happen is there was 2 or 3 people who had it all in their head. Well, 2 of them would leave. There's only one. So the one guy would train the other people just through training, right? Hands-on training. There was no documentation at all, like just none. And those days are still here, right? They're not going away, but you're seeing a big wave of people who are realizing for their use cases for, especially when using it with AI, that they really, really need that. Now, the next piece is data governance and compliance. And data governance and compliance usually refers to a lot around how you're actually protecting your data, the data quality, access to your data. So there's a lot of different avenues and pieces of that equation. But data, this has been said since, maybe like 2010 or in that era of social media coming over, that data is the new oil. Data is the new gold, because it is so incredibly important. With everything that's happening in AI, with all the security or security breaches and leaks in data, all the issues that people are having with AI trying to use their data, they're realizing that their data is one of their most important assets. And so they're really cracking down on security, compliance. They're really trying to utilize that as best as they possibly can, because, I mean, if you just take a step back and you look at what's driving your business, for a lot of these companies, it's the data, and they need to get it under control. And 2023, we saw a big surge in this. This year is a year where you're going to see a lot more companies making announcements. Hey, we did this initiative to secure our data. We did this initiative to make sure that these things are done. And they'll tell clients, because clients want to know, if we're using your AI products, that your data is good on the back end. And so that's kind of like it's a reassurance thing, right? And it's only going to be more important in years to come. And the last thing, I'm just going to read this, is documentation allows for better compliance, data quality management, and risk reduction. Kind of some of the things I said. Oh, I'm talking too much. I'm already 37 minutes in. I'm going to have to go over, Will. I hope you don't mind. Well, I'll try to not talk too long, and then we'll have time for Q&A. We'll do that. All right. Data unification. Data unification is really and I've mentioned it a few times, but the idea that you can really use all your data. Now, I read this, I think, on like a Medium article, so don't quote me on this. I don't know if this is 100% true, but it basically said the average company uses about 30% of their data. And the reason is not because the 70% of their data is bad. The reason is because all their data is so spread out. Only certain people have access to certain pieces of the data in Excel files, in different databases, and it just can't be all used, which is really, if we're talking just about before how data is the new oil, data is gold, then you're only using 30% of it. That's not good. That's not a good thing. And so data silos are kind of this term that most people have heard of, where it's like, I have my data in a silo over here. I also have data in a silo over here. We want to use both of them, but because of how we've set up our systems, this is in some weird database over here. These are just in PDF files and Excel files and, some OneDrive over here. And we can't use them. We can't connect it and use it, even though we really want to. Or if we do, we have to export it into like Excel's, merge it together in a manual process, upload it to this SFTP, which then automatically ingests it into the system. Actually, let me take that back. I am speaking from personal experience. I was gonna try to say something funny. That is absolutely what I used to do or have to do with some previous companies before we set up some more automation in our processes. That's how a lot of companies are. And just as all these other things, data is becoming so incredibly important, people are like, we can't sit around and not use all this data that could be beneficial in this area or this piece of our product or this for our customer service or this or this. We need to bring it together and we have to do this. Now, there's a lot of different avenues for this, but one that I think a lot of people have heard about or looked at is something like Microsoft Fabric, which is meant to literally put all of your data into one place, and it's meant to keep it extremely organized. And of course, it's under the Microsoft umbrella, which has a really great brand recognition, and that is exactly why they designed this. Now, there are other products and tools that you can do this that may have already come before that, but this is Microsoft's version of this, and they have something called OneLake. I think I wrote what it does at the bottom. It says this one data lake, which a data lake is was a huge buzzword about like 7-8 years ago. Data lake was a huge buzzword. It's like, hey, you can just put all your data in here and you're gonna have access to all of it. It's amazing. And then people realized, they were like, wait a second, we don't know how to actually put all of our data in one place and create the correct schemas and data architecture to actually use that data. That's our fault. We're not going to use data lakes anymore. So it kind of like, it was a huge thing, like a huge movement, and then it really fizzled out. But it's still a great concept, and that's what Microsoft Fabric is trying to do. And so the one data lake is meant to be for the entire company, the entire organization, to have one copy of data from multiple analytics engines running at the same time. So you don't have to get it from this database and pull it in, and get it from this database, pull it in, merge it, put it into this data lake, and then do all this. It allows you to access the data where it is, pull it in, read it, query it, use it all in one place. That's the idea. These types of systems are going to be a big hit with a lot of organizations, I would say, specifically small and medium size initially. The large companies are always going to have an issue with this because you have years of data trauma and infrastructure trauma and architecture trauma that is going to take a long time to unravel. So larger companies will have a harder time with this, but small and medium-sized companies should be able to utilize these very quickly. And it's just, it is something that I wish I had known about or was kind of around back when I was in analytics and as a manager, because these are the exact issues that were really difficult to solve. They were really, really, really difficult to solve. How do you get this data over here and this data over here to connect? It's a universal problem. And so 2024, you're seeing new tools coming out. You're seeing people really working on this because, again, data is just incredibly important. All right. This is my wish list. This is what I want to see in 2024. The first is I want hyper-realistic virtual worlds where I can do my business meetings in. Because right now I have to do it like this, where I'm doing like a webcam. It's not ideal. It's not bad. I don't mind it. But I do have a VR headset. It's not here, but I do have a VR headset. I mean, I'm over here in the meta world. I'm living it up. But it's just not good enough. It's just not good enough for me. I want something that's hyper realistic and for other people to be able to access and do it as well. That is what I want. The next thing I want is a robotic, super intelligent assistant that helps me with essentially living my life. I want it to fold my laundry, and then I also want it to respond to emails. That is the dream, and that is what I wish for 2024. And the last one is real-time brain decoding for instant analysis, aka what Neuralink is doing. I just need to sync up with Elon. And genuinely, I think I could boost my productivity by like 200%. I think if I had something like that, I would be the most efficient person in the world. That is our future. I just want it to happen now. So I think that's more than reasonable. I think that's more than fair. Of course, I'm being a little bit facetious or hyperbolic or whatever term you'd like to use, but a guy can dream. Now, that is all I have. And I think Will's going to come back and we're going to do some Q&A. I went a little fast at the end. I could talk about these topics. For each one of these topics, I could probably talk like an hour on. And so I try to limit myself.
Alex, I think we can see the passion shining through. I love it when you go do the deep dive. But I think it's great to get completely lost in the topic. With everything that you said and all of the trends that you've mentioned, is now the right time to start off as a data analyst?
You know, there's good and bad in what's going on right now. I would say the bad is we're seeing more layoffs. The economy's a little down. Definitely not. It's not great. Just with inflation, and everything, and the layoffs. That's not great. But that's unfortunately, that's just kind of how things go. Every so often, this is a cyclic thing that if you look back, this is not new to 2023 or 2024, unfortunately. Um, so we're kind of in like this little dip right now. I do think things are going to go back up. If you just historically, that's just how things go, unfortunately. In terms of, is it actually a viable career for the future? 100%. I think you're going to see a lot of people joining and coming into the data world for the long foreseeable future. I absolutely don't see AI replacing people en masse like we used to worry about back in early 2023. I think we really understand its limitations and understand what it can and can't do right now. And even with improvements, even with a lot of improvements, I I was listening to Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. He was like, you know, everyone freaked out and panicked in 2023, and now all they're doing is complaining about how slow it is and how it doesn't give good outputs and how it's terrible. He's like, people after a couple months, it's just become like part of their tool chest, and he's like, it hasn't replaced anybody really. And so he's like, um, I he was specifically talking about AGI. He's like, one of these days in 5-10 years, we'll hit AGI. It'll be mass panic for 2 weeks, and then after that, people will go on with their lives and do what they've always done. And so I'm not as like on that side. I definitely think it will play an impact, but I absolutely see there being more jobs created with AI and more teams and companies opening up their doors to data professionals than have ever before. And so I think we're just in a bit of a downtrend. And it is unfortunate. I hate this. Like, I don't like seeing when my friends and people who I know lose their jobs. And I have recently. It's not fun to see, but there is going to be an upswing, and there is going to be a big drive and push back into the data world in not too long, I think.
Awesome, thanks for that. If anyone out there's got any questions on YouTube or LinkedIn, now's the time to ask. Also on Big Market in the Q&A tab, do drop them in right now and I will go through them. I know this evening we've got a lot of people who are watching who are thinking about maybe transitioning into the field of data analytics. How do you think, given these trends in AI, given trends in the job market, what do you think positions are like for the beginner, the entry-level positions? Are companies looking for different skills maybe? Are they honing in more on soft skills or cross-functional roles? Are you seeing changes in the market at that end?
I haven't seen them myself. I just anecdotally hear them here and there. I get a lot of people reaching out to me who are like, "Hey, you helped me get a job. Here's how I got it." And then I read their story, and it usually, not always, but I've heard a lot of stories like this, which is, "Hey, Alex, I learned a lot of the skills from you, but I used to be a nurse, and I used my nursing background to get a job at a healthcare analytics company, almost very similar to me." I see a lot of that for a lot of different domains. And so I think if I were to kind of read into that, which again, I don't have like a ton of hands-on experience with that specific thing. I would just say that I think domain knowledge is going to become more and more and more important. Whereas maybe 7-8 years ago, it was a lot on the skills, but now with you know, skills being more widely available to learn, and AI being able to help with the coding pieces a little bit here and there, and AI being integrated into things, it's more about truly understanding what the data is telling you, what it means. And if you have experience, like domain experience in a certain area, and you're able to transition that into analytics, that's going to be like a golden ticket. And that's why when I had about a year ago, I stopped doing about a year ago. For 2 years, I did mentorship. The people who I saw who were the most successful with transitioning careers were the people who had experience in a field already. So they were, one was a lawyer, one was a warehouse worker. So he understood logistics pretty well because of the kind of work he did. One was a teacher, one was a nurse. Every single one of them were using their background in some way to transition into the career, into analytics. And I truly believe that that is only going to become more important in the future.
Fantastic answer. I would say it mirrors exactly the experience the graduates that we have through CareerFoundry, those with different backgrounds transitioning into a new field. A lot of people think that they're going to be starting out scratch with zero skills, but actually you're bringing a wealth of experience from your previous position into your new position, and you will see things with different perspectives. So great answer there. I'm diving into big market. I see Joanna's got a great question specifically about AI. How trustworthy is AI and AI tools? Can we always fully rely on it?
No, and I would not. I've been using ever since ChatGPT really became a thing, like a thing that most people were using back in like late 2022. I've been using it very consistently. I used it today, and I've tried different variations. I've used Bard and Anthropic and GitHub Copilot and different AI assistants and tools here and there. Here's what I'll say: is they're only so intelligent to a point right now. Now, could they get better in the future? I absolutely think they will. But even right now, I have so many issues with using AI almost every time I use it. It never gives me what I want. You really do learn how to talk to it to where it understands what you're trying to do. But even then, even if you give it all the context in the world, all the information in the world, it only knows what it knows. It's not like this all-knowing genius that just is like Einstein level in every single topic. It's just smart in every single topic and has a wealth of data and information to pull from. But even just looking at coding, I I have gotten I've gotten more frustrated at using AI for coding than I have been just doing it myself. Because in my head, my perception is AI should be able to do this because it's not that hard because I've done this before. And I could have written it myself in like 30 minutes or an hour. And I spent an hour trying to get AI to do 90% of it. And it got me like 60% of the way there. And I'm just super frustrated. So I end up writing it myself. So just for coding, that's an example with coding, but you'll see that with a ton of stuff. For example, text summarization. I use text summarization a lot. I have a tool on my browser that when I'm on a website, it'll generalize it, and I like it, and it gets the bullet points. But then when I'm like skimming through the article, I'm like, wait a second, that's like super important, and it didn't even mention that in the summary. And I get mad at the AI. I'm like, hey AI, I'm like, why didn't you include this as like the most important part? And they're like, oh yeah, no, I should have included that. Sorry about that. I'm like, the more you use it, that truly, the more you use it, the more you realize its limitations, and it has a lot. Especially with as tools like these tools become a lot more commercialized, they're getting almost a little bit dumber because they have to limit themselves for liability purposes. So like ChatGPT, you've probably seen this on Twitter or X or LinkedIn or wherever. They're like, hey, why is ChatGPT giving me answers like this now? Because this is worse than how it used to give me. They have to do that for legal purposes. And so um, I genuinely think you're going to get in the future better answers, but those limitations are only going to get worse because I keep up with a lot of AI stuff right now. The UK, a lot of European countries, America, Canada are working heavily on restricting AI models and how they're used and all these different things, which whether you like it or not is going to change how they work, the responses they're allowed to give, things they can do legally. And so, I there's just so many different aspects to AI that it's hard to get into all of them. I just don't see AI ever being like this perfect one tool that does everything. I just, at least not now. Maybe in like, 10 years something will pop up and I'll be like, I was like, that really could work. That really could be the one tool for everything. But now, absolutely not even close.
I think linking onto the AI track, Rita's also got a great question. Considering the pervasiveness of AI, what type of uses should someone trying to enter the market as a data analyst should practice or get experience with related to AI?
Yeah, that's a question that I've had with a question that I've answered with a lot of different people who have messaged me who on this topic, they're like, hey, is it even worth getting into the data field with AI? And every single time I'm like, yes, absolutely. Um, how I recommend like learning about it or using it is for usually 2 or 3 specific things. The first one is just coding. I think it just really lends itself well to help you learn how to code. Not it, it, I've tried to get it to like teach me coding, but it only goes so in depth, and you have to kind of already know how to code for it to really teach it to you well. And so it's this juxtaposition there, but it can help you understand a lot of concepts and give you examples, which is really great. But if you're trying to use it like how you would use it as a data analyst for coding, you'll say, here's an example of some sample data. How would I get this in MySQL? How would you write this question in MySQL? And then it'll write out the code for you. You can test it in your MySQL database, and you can try to see if it works. If it doesn't, you can go back to AI and revise it, or you revise it yourself. So that's just one way, coding. The next thing is, I would say, is it's really good with brainstorming ideas. For data analysts, in the real world, things are very, very nuanced and very, it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray. And so oftentimes you'll have this scenario where you're like, when you're learning just on yourself, by yourself, or on like a platform, it kind of is, it's catered to help you learn. But real world scenarios are very different, where you're like, is it best to do this or is it best to do this? Because those are 2 very different things, which will change how I get the data, how I clean the data, how I do all these things, which is best. Well, posing these things into AI, I found to be very helpful with brainstorming ideas, because I'm like, there are pros and cons of both. Tell me the pros and cons of doing it this way versus this way. Or tell me what other options I may have besides these 2 options. And it really helps me like think about how I'm going to solve a problem. And so there's more examples, because I don't want to talk on that question forever, because I could just keep going. But just those 2 examples, genuinely, you can practice that today. And you can start working through that. Get a data set from Kaggle, put it into a database, put it into a Python data frame, put it into R, put it anywhere you want, and try to solve it using AI. Try to ask it questions, try to have it do things for you. You will see the limitations quickly. The more you play around with it, the more limitations you see. And it's a good thing. I think it's a very, very good thing for newcomers to see the limitations that AI has, because most newcomers are like, AI can do this and I don't have to, or I won't be able to get a job. But when they actually start messing around with it and trying it, they're like, oh, yeah, no, I get what Alex is saying. Like this they can't really do this piece or that piece. And so it's good to get that hands-on experience with it.
Awesome, thank you. And just to put a shameless plug out there, we have recently updated all of CareerFoundry's program with AI. So we are AI enhanced, especially on the data analytics program. Shout out to CareerFoundry's curriculum team who've worked very hard on that in the background. I'm going to switch over to YouTube. Hi, everyone over on YouTube, Alex's audience. There's a great question come in from Aman. I've been working for 3 years as a data analyst. What makes the difference between being a data analyst and a senior data analyst? So when we're looking at career levels.
Sure. Yeah, I was never a senior data analyst. Just so everyone knows, I never was. I jumped straight from a mid-level data analyst into a manager role. It was very odd. So I never got to fully experience that senior title. Although I think I definitely was at the level of senior. I just didn't get that pay jump in those 2 years that I did, and I just went to be a manager. But here's what I will say: when you're a beginner, when you first start out, there aren't a ton of expectations. You get into the job and it's like, hey, run these queries for us, debug this, make sure this process is working right. And you just you learn. You're there to learn, you're there to grow, and the company is hoping that you'll stay with them a long time. And, it's a good ROI. Well, when you become mid-level, the expectation is okay, you're going to take on some more serious projects. You're going to take on more important work, and we shouldn't have to baby you as much. You should be able to do most of this independently. Like that is definitely an expectation. You should be able to do this independently. Maybe you're even kind of somewhat mentoring a little bit like the new people in your company. So if a new person is hired on as an entry level, that you're there to kind of like support them and help them. Then you get to senior, and the senior level is you are expected to work on your the work that you're doing is expected to be a very high level of difficulty, as well as collaborating with a lot of other teams in order to make it work. For example, back just when I was a mid-level, but again, I definitely was, I would say I was more like senior level, even though I didn't have that title. I was taking on big projects that had, $1 million budgets. And, we'd be working with 3 or 4 different departments on these projects, and all of us are working in collaboration, and it's really advanced and really, really tough data pipelines that we're trying to create. And we're working with, it's very, very difficult, right? You couldn't give those types of projects to mid-level or entry level. It would just be too complex. And so the technical skills have to be much higher for senior level. Usually the domain knowledge is also much higher, because you have to know the data inside and out. That's back when I was working with hematology and oncology data. That was my specialty. Like I knew that data inside and out. I knew it extremely well, how it originated, how it got into our systems, how we used it for all of our products and all of our different things. And so it's a knowledge thing with both skill and with domain. And then you really should be working incredibly independently and helping mid-level and entry level. That is the difference. And so you're just working on a lot more important work that has a bigger impact on the business because they know that you can handle it and they trust you. Whereas mid-level, especially entry level, they're not going to give you those big projects that are worth a lot for the company because, if you mess up or you don't know what you're doing or you haven't had experience with it, there's the lack of trust. And so senior level, they should trust you, know that you're going to be doing a really good job and that you know what you're talking about.
Awesome. Great. Thanks for the answer. Also, a couple of questions that come through about portfolios. I've seen a question by Bianca on Big Marker. And just looking here, also with, looking at how the industry has evolved with AI, looking at the trends, what is the relevance of a portfolio in the industry for people who are thinking about transitioning into the field?
Portfolios are still really important. I don't see them going away anytime soon. I still have a portfolio. I updated it a couple months ago with a new project that I built. Not for anybody. It was just me. I was just like, I had an idea and I built it and I never told anybody about it. I added it to my portfolio because even me, I need something to demonstrate my work. I have my YouTube channel. I have all these things, but I still work with, people, and portfolios are, I would say they're still extremely relevant in the fact that even with AI, you need to demonstrate your skills. So they don't want to hire someone who doesn't know the skill that they're hiring for. It really is as simple as that. For example, like at a previous job, I was on the hiring team. We would test for SQL or Power BI or whatever we were testing for. And if they could demonstrate it in a project, it made them the conversation flowed so much easier in an interview. For example, with Power BI. Power BI is a very simple tool on the surface, very easy user interface, but using it in the real world is actually pretty difficult. That's why they're called BI developers, not BI visualization specialists for the most part, because they're working with a lot of data pipelines and a lot of different things to create the data and make it good for the visualizations. And so when we would hire for these people, if they had a portfolio and we could just see what they've worked on and be like, okay, how did you do this? And they can walk us through that. Every single time someone did it, I could tell right away whether they really knew what they were talking about or they didn't. If they didn't have a portfolio, it's harder to engage in that conversation and really understand what they know and what they don't know. And so I have always felt and been a very big believer in portfolios, and I don't see them going away anytime soon. I think they're still very relevant.
And just to touch on what you said earlier, in data analytics, how much web development skills, front end development skills come into play
You mean like
with
visualizations?
data? Yes, with data
Oh, it's a
analytics.
very wide range. I literally have met people who are data analysts who literally only worked on visualizations. They were like what what I would call like a visualization specialist. They have the title of data analyst. But I've met people who do only visualization. I've also met people, including myself, who did zero visualization for some of my jobs. Now, my first two jobs, I did data visualization in Tableau. And then when I became a data analyst at the Fortune 500 company, I was doing data collection. So we worked with, ETL pipelines and, data migration and all these different things. I didn't work on the visualizations at all. That wasn't my job. We had BI developers. So then I would go to the BI developer. I'd say, hey, here's what we need for a client. They would build it out. I would review their work before I hand it off to the client. I'd say, oh, okay, let's actually change this. We need this data point instead of this. I didn't actually build it at all. So it varies widely. I think there is usually a happy balance somewhere in there for most data roles, especially at small companies where you do everything. But at larger companies, there is usually a happy balance where it's like 80% not visualization, maybe 20% visualization, or more often than not, I usually see it like it's 10% visualization or 15% visualization. But a lot of it is in the data using databases, working with clients, you know, different skills other than just visualization. It's usually a smaller percentage.
Fantastic, thanks for that. I'm just going to jump very quickly, and I am mindful of the time here, and we are pushing on. For anybody who's interested in maybe learning more of a tool, we have got a CareerFoundry mentor who will be presenting another presentation in a couple of weeks. Dr. Humera, who is a machine learning expert based in Munich, and she'll be doing a deep dive into SQL. I've posted the link on Bigmark, but maybe someone from the team could just take that link and also post it on YouTube too. Alex, there was another great question that came in on YouTube from one of your audience, and it picked up on something that you mentioned about cloud data analytics before. Shane is asking, what are the skills required to become a cloud data analyst?
Sure. I'm not surprised. That's a great question. I'm not surprised it came from my YouTube channel. They're very smart people over there. What I will say is oftentimes most people don't start out in the cloud right away. It just I've worked with a lot of people, and most people who I've like either mentored or talked with, they're like, oh yeah, we start off in SQL, and then then I moved to a company that used this, or then I moved to our company migrated to this. So most people don't start out in the cloud. It's just from my experience. But as more companies move to the cloud, like we were talking about earlier, I think it's going to be this year is for my YouTube channel. I'm going to be focusing a lot on the cloud. I'm going to have a whole series on AWS, a whole series on Azure, because I people need to start learning it for sure. So what do you need to know? Usually there's about three main components that I think are really practical to data analytics. One is something like Azure Data Factory. I'm going to speak specifically on Azure for this use case. Azure would be, or for this example, Azure does a million different things. It genuinely does. You go in there and start looking at Azure, it is overwhelming the amount of things that they have. But specific to data analytics, Azure Data Factory is for like ETL pipelines and ingesting data. I worked with Azure Data Factory for like 2 years straight. And it's a little bit more advanced. It's not something I would start out in. I'll just as a side note, I wouldn't start with Azure Data Factory, but it's something that one of the three things that I would learn. The other thing is just working with their databases. So they have databases, they have data warehouses, they have data lakes. I would just start with the databases. If you know how to use the databases, usually you can pick up on how to use the warehouses, and the data lakes are a little bit more complicated with how you're actually working with the data and use it. Because then you got to connect to something like Databricks and use maybe like something like PySpark. But that's a whole different conversation. Maybe we need to do another webinar on just like cloud platforms. I can do like a deep dive in like Azure and AWS, because that I could talk about that for a long time. So I'm gonna take it back. I'm gonna say just those. I would just start with those two. Start with databases and data warehouses. Just start with that. Learn how to use it. Learn how to put data into it from like an Excel file or connect to a data source. Just start out with that. Then learn about Azure Data Factory. That's where I would start. Now, there's so many other aspects. Azure is a huge ecosystem, so it can be very overwhelming. I would just start with those two. Then you can branch out into other things. Like I said, there's data lakes and data bricks that's integrated in there, and there's just so many things. So don't get overwhelmed. It can be overwhelming. Same thing with AWS. AWS maybe even more so. But don't get overwhelmed. Just ease into it with a database like you should be somewhat familiar with if you've used like MySQL or Microsoft SQL Server. Start off there and figure that out, and then move on to the next stage.
Awesome. I'm mindful of the time, but there's some really great questions on YouTube. I think we should do a quick fire. Alex. We'll try it. Yeah, we'll try.
I'll answer as quick as I can.
It's a new format. Okay. Shabin is asking, if you were to choose only one data analytics tool for the next 10 years, what would that tool be?
SQL. All right, next question.
Right. Cheyenne, sorry if I pronounce anyone's names wrong. Cheyenne is asking, what should I learn for front-end data analysis, Streamlit or Dash?
I like Streamlit myself. I've used Dash too, and it's also really good. I just have more experience with Streamlit. I think it has a really good community around it.
Fantastic. Gonzo's asking, what are your thoughts on learning Coral language before any other data language?
I'm not super familiar with that, so I'm going to say pass.
I think we should add the pass button too. That's good. Zero, do you think Gemini Ultra is needed to speed up learning way, or is it enough to use ChatGPT 3.5?
No, you can use, I would say even like ChatGPT 3.5 is perfectly acceptable. It does a very good job. Now, okay, this is supposed to be rapid fire, but you'll see improvements with ChatGPT 4. And maybe if you're using the API, it's going to be a little bit different. But you don't need the latest and greatest with AI right now. Maybe in like a year, you shouldn't be using 3.5, but 3.5 perfectly acceptable to use, and it's free.
Awesome. And then Robert's asking, is learning Excel still worth it given Microsoft Copilot?
100%. 100%. In fact, I'm making a video right now on Microsoft Copilot because I started paying for it and using it. It has a long way to go. And Excel is like the de facto tool in any company for businesses all around the world. You have to know how to use it. So yeah, you'll see my video not too long on that. Maybe next week, maybe the week after. But there's a lot of issues with it right now. There was a reason why it was delayed for like 6 extra months or like 8 months when they said that it would be coming out. There's a reason, and it's still there. And so no, I'm not. Don't put your faith in GitHub or Microsoft Copilot right now.
So Robert, this goes out to you. There's no way that you can avoid Microsoft Excel. You still got to learn it. It's going to be there. Alex, I think we're going to end it there. That was some great questions. Thank you so much for the answers. Thank you so much for the presentation. As I said before at the start, anyone watching on CareerFoundry on any of our channels, do go and check out Alex's YouTube channel, Alex the Analyst, and help him get to 700,000. But also, he's got some great content up and coming. So do subscribe to that. If anyone's interested in data analytics, anyone's interested in CareerFoundry, I'm just going to post on Big Market a link to book a call with a program advisor. We've also put it in the description below. So do have a look there. If you've got any questions about jobs in your locality, our curriculum, the dual mentorship model guarantee that we have, do book a call with a program advisor and get your questions answered. We are currently offering a 20% off CareerFoundry's data analytics program. I've added a little sticky note on Big Market, but I think it's also on YouTube. So to claim that, simply click there and it will take you through to the discount. Alex, I'm sure we're going to see you again on the channel. This sounded fantastic. I think we should do some stuff about cloud platforms. I think we should We should go into some new territories, I think. But thank you so much for presenting this evening, and thank you to Alex's audience too for joining us. And we're going to be sending around the recording tomorrow via email, but you can also see it over on Alex's channel. If you get to the live section, you can see that, and also some previous webinars that we've done together over the past 12 months. So yeah, thank you everybody. And it's time for dinner for me, but for some people it's probably breakfast time or lunch time. And Alex,